Okay, let's go. Okay, let's go.
Welcome to Unified Canine Connections Week 7, Episode 7. So this week we are going to be talking all about arousal in dogs. What that is, what it looks like, some tips on how you can help your dog calm down, and how to live with your dog that's possibly has some arousal issues. So, I am your host, I'm Karen Baxter, and...
I am Ed Michelle.
Yeah, excellent. So, let's get right into it, Ed.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start by talking about what is arousal.
You want me to do a definition?
Mm-hmm.
I think arousal essentially is your dog would kind of be described as when they become really overexcited, overwhelmed, or dysregulated.
Yes.
Right?
I would agree.
Now,
Yeah.
the question would be, what is causing this over-arousal? What's kind of working in the background? And I think you've been doing a lot of research this week
I have,
to kind of prepare for this talk about,
Yeah.
What is at play that the dog is not in control of when this is happening.
Yeah. So basically what's happening is it's a biological response. It's the activation of the dog's nervous system. So not to get too scientific-y, but so it's part of their autonomic nervous system, which is things that regulate like heart rate and breathing,
Okay.
all those automated systems that we don't really think about every day, right? So we have them too, like not just dogs. And with arousal, that system gets activated. And when that happens, when they get into a state where their heart rate is elevated and their body is reacting to whatever is going on in the environment, and they're not able to control their emotions in that moment, it's also an impact on their brain, because in order to think and focus and do things, they need to be able to access the executive function in their brain.
Yep.
And when their autonomic nervous system gets turned on and their arousal levels go up, then their brain switches from that thinking state into a survival state. And then just those instinctual behaviors and behaviors that just biologically occur happen in those moments. It's no longer the dog's choice.
Yeah.
This is now automatic. That's the thing that we need to keep
I
in
like what
mind.
you said there about an automatic kind of response where, so often I think this gets looked at as a training issue.
Correct.
Right? Like my dog is misbehaving right now, where really they are just as much a victim of what's happening than anything else. So it's not a cognitive choice that they're making. And I like how you said, because when we talk about, cognitive choices and thinking and body, those are all so intertwined, where how you are feeling is going to impact what you're thinking, which is then going to impact how your body feels, or vice versa. How your body feels is going to impact how you feel, which then impacts how you think.
That's right.
Right? It's all kind of part of the holistic approach when we talk about dog training.
That's right. And in the autonomic nervous system, you do have two parts. You have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And in the sympathetic, that's the one that elevates your heart rate, and then you get the adrenaline rushes and the hormonal impacts.
Yeah.
And then in the parasympathetic, that's the areas like your digestion and your ability to relax. And so that's the two parts. And so when they are overly aroused, it is the sympathetic part of their nervous system that is really being overactivated.
Yeah.
And the parasympathetic nervous system is actually shut down in that moment. So that's why dogs stop eating and they stop focusing. And so the key, though, is you're right. It's not a bad dog. It's not a dog that's misbehaving, right? It's a dog who literally has no capacity in that moment to listen to cues and do what we want them to do. I think there's a really good way. Maybe we can think of something we can relate this to in the human world. I know you have kids, right? So isn't this very similar to the way that it is with children?
Absolutely. Right. And especially when you're dealing with young children who are so much more, like I said, a victim as well to these inner workings that they're not yet in control of.
Yep.
Is oftentimes if you're looking at them and saying, hey, calm down, or don't act that way, they're not in control of what is impacting their behavior at that moment.
Right.
They could be getting into these modes or into these kind of behavior shifts where they too themselves are feeling so influenced by their own body and their chemistry and everything internally that they don't yet have the skills to be able to, take a step back and regulate themselves out of this behavior, which oftentimes, hate to break it to you, adults also have a lot of trouble doing, right?
Yes.
But so much so, we see it so much more so in children when, something that could be triggering and it could be a stress response, it could be, many different things that are kind of, pushing them into this mode. It could be, excitedness, it could be, overtiredness, whatever it is that is activating some of these things, they now are a passenger. Right?
Yeah.
And I think what we're trying to do as parents, and then as pet parents, it kind of correlates as well, is to teach them and be the co-passenger along with them to say, okay, I can guide you through this as best as I can, but it's not going to be something that I can just snap you out of.
No, that's right. Yep, exactly. And I really think too that children and dogs, very similar, a large part of the reason that they struggle in those moments, I think they panic, like say they go into survival mode, right? And it's that loss of control and the ability to do things naturally that would just automatically calm a system down.
Yep.
I think we take away their abilities to do that because as the adults or as the humans, right, we are controlling what the dogs and the children do.
Yeah.
Right.
And so like a lot of what my personal approach as a parent is right now is we're really just trying in those moments to get her to recognize where she is in the spectrum of these behaviors.
Yeah.
So not saying don't act this way or here's how to fix it, just simply acknowledging where you're at.
Yeah.
Right. And that type of acknowledgement, kind of trying to be a little bit more present in these moments, is ways that we can hopefully then introduce some self-regulation tactics and things, in the future.
Yeah.
But right now, just getting her to be a little bit more conscious through these moments, I think is a big thing.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, with dogs, we don't have the ability to sit there and talk to them and communicate to them and explain and try and do some of the tactics that we would do with kids, which is where now this becomes a dog training issue for us necessarily, right? Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to just train out of it because of all the instances that we've just listed.
That's right, exactly. So, but there is things we can do as humans,
Absolutely,
right, to
yes,
absolutely help them.
absolutely.
I think, like for a good example of like where you were saying how you try to get your daughter to recognize where she is in the moment so that she learns how to self-regulate. I think for dogs we can do something similar, except because we can't explain it to them. We just have to give them opportunity to do some of that stuff.
Yep.
So I'll give you a really quick example. So a dog who just walks into a room for the first time or just comes out of a car. Let's do that one. They just got out of the car. They're at a new park. They've never been there before. They've never been to that location, so they don't really know anything. Overloaded their system. So now the dog is jumping and freaking out and barking and doing all the things that most of us don't like as humans because we get embarrassed, right?
Yep.
And we tighten up on the leash because we're trying to control this dog.
Yeah.
Sometimes just taking a breath yourself, being calm, and just giving more leash to the dog and standing still and letting the dog sniff around their space, just get acclimated to the environment, and you can see them start to just come down, right?
And I think also, unfortunately, the social nature of our existence impacts here. Where you get out and you're thinking, oh, people think I have an untrained dog or I have a bad dog, and hey, don't embarrass me like this.
That's right.
In these moments, we also need to understand the inner workings that are happening behind the scenes there, and we need to regulate ourselves.
That's right, because our arousal goes
up. Take a breath.
Mm-hmm.
Understand your dog is currently having a problem and needs your support through this. Right.
Brilliant.
And then I like what you're saying too of like developing some sort of strategy or routine or process that we're going to do. Yes, we can't sit down and talk to them like we were saying, but we can through repetition create these behavior patterns that are self-regulating and calming to the dog, that hopefully they start to internalize, and then you're going to start to see them over time act them out on themselves, right? And then now you have a dog that has these strategies. And it's the same thing when we say to my daughter, we understand right now you are overloaded, right? We understand you're getting into this zone. Take a deep breath, right? Let's count. Let's focus on something in the room. Let's play, I Spy. Let's start looking at things. Or we do a tactic. Let's blow out our candles. So you blow out my
Right.
candles on my
Yeah.
hand. But getting her to focus on something and think and be conscious in those things, over time you start to see her, and she has, thankfully, knock on wood, done this, is she starts to take her own deep breaths
Right.
without us having to,
That's right.
cue her into
You're
that.
basically building behavior patterns.
Behavior patterns.
And that's it,
Yeah.
right? Now, why do you think that arousal, I think arousal matters more than obedience? Like, we really need to understand the arousal piece in our dogs first versus just obedience.
Well, I think the tagline that we kept when we were kind of preparing for this, that we kept coming through this, is like, you're not going to be able to cue your way out of these zones, these behavior states, right?
No.
So if you're hoping that my obedience is going to fix this, that's not going to happen. Now, obedience can be a really valuable tool to help create some of these behavior patterns, but obedience in and of itself is just a tool.
That's right.
And it matters how you use that tool properly.
100%.
Right.
And don't forget that when they're overly aroused, their brains have switched, right? It's no longer thinking. They're in survival mode.
Yeah.
So when that happens, they can't access the thinking part of their brain. So if you're trying to just train it out of them, right? Well, they're not capable.
Yeah.
There's no capacity
And I don't know
there.
if I'm jumping ahead here, but I know that we had talked about, the types of zones.
That's next, yeah.
Okay, because just so we're saying, there's zones basically that you can kind of put a box around some of this stuff, and obviously things and behaviors will fall outside of it at times. But in general, there's kind of like three kind of states or emotional zones that we can talk about that kind of walk you through the map of, or the blueprint of over arousal.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And the first one is that thinking zone. It's that neutral state. It's where they're calm, they're focused, they're engaged. That is where your obedience is going to thrive, and that is where it's going to be really effective.
Yeah.
If we get outside of that zone, and I don't know if you want to get into the other two yet, but when we get outside of that, your obedience effectiveness is really going to drop off.
Yeah.
So we need to find a way to regulate them or back them back down into that thinking zone, and then that's when your obedience can be effective.
Yeah.
Right. But if we're just trying to do behaviors and they're overloaded, it's probably not going to happen.
Now, so we may as well go on. So let's talk about the other two zones. So what about the next zone?
All right, so we said the first one is that thinking zone, right?
Yep.
That's where you're calm, you're focused, you're engaged, you're ready to go. It's hopefully the default state of your dog, which for not every dog is going to be, but that's what we want to really encourage, is that thinking zone.
Yep.
When you get outside of there, now you're getting into what we've kind of said is like that energized zone.
Yes.
Right. This is where you're building. This is where you can be, really overexcited. And it doesn't mean these are not necessarily negative behaviors, quote unquote, right? They can be really friendly during this. They can be really social, but they can be dysregulated. They are energized. They are bouncing around the room. They are highly distractible, right? And that is a very frustrating time if in that moment what you're hoping for is more control or calmness or predictability.
Yeah. And I think we could take a minute and just, what does that look like? So a thinking dog, they're the ones that you say sit, and they look up at you, and they have calm body language, and they're, not doing anything too silly, and they're able to listen, and they're able to build some duration, and they have the capacity to do that, right? In the energized zone, would it be fair to say those are the dogs that you can see, they're still able to think a bit, you'd still cue them, but their ability to stay put for any length of time is not happening. They're just not able to in that moment, right? They act like they've got ADHD or something. They're just too energetic.
I think this is
and
where
they can't sit
oftentimes
still.
owners will say oh, my dog is just they're ignoring me, right? Or they have selective hearing is something you hear a lot.
Yes.
Or they have selective hearing. It's well, honestly, I don't think they're cognitively choosing to listen to you here and not listen to you here. Oftentimes, it's their arousal state, which is making it more difficult for them to focus on your cues and your instruction.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. So they'll often scan the environment instead of focusing on their person.
Yeah.
Right. They might get a little jumpy and a little vocalizing. They could get a little whiny, like dogs that whimper a bit and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And then they're going to have much more difficulty doing anything for any length of time. So training becomes a little more challenging. I mean, so for some dogs, you want a little bit, you want to be on the high end of the thinking zone, just at the bottom of the heightened zone. If you want to do dog sports or something, where it's just okay, well, I want a bit of that drive in there, but I still need them to be able to think. So
well, I find too, this is sometimes where if you are being really, really, really over reinforcing, like we're using tons of just, super, super yummy food, and I'm really, really intense, and I'm really, really engaging, and my energy is very, very high. You can get that dog so excited that now their ability to actually focus decreases.
It's true.
Right? And you have this dog that is kind of now on this hyper vigilant kind of, what are we doing? Oh, where's the food? Where's this? Where's that? Well, what I really actually want there is for myself to, take a breath, don't probably dial down my energy a little bit and have them focusing on the task instead of just thinking we're just having fun right now.
Right. So what is our last zone that causes the most challenges for people?
I think that's when now that energy, that energized zone passes what we in the past has talked about as like a threshold, and we are now into that overloaded zone. Right, we are now into kind of an overwhelmed, dysregulated kind of ability or emotional state where now a lot of their faculties are going to disappear here. Like you said, sometimes the survival instinct kicks in, and this is where a lot of those quote unquote problem behaviors are going to start to emerge. And this is where oftentimes they're going to be labeled, or internally we start to think of, oh, they're being a bad dog. They're misbehaving. They're getting aggressive. They're whatever term you want to put onto it. Oftentimes they're probably extremely overloaded. And now, like you said, their nervous system is just rapidly firing, and they are no longer in control at this point.
We've seen this a lot in the shelter, right? Because we've worked in the shelters, right? I volunteer there. Still, I'm going tomorrow actually, and so like a dog that's like overloaded in the shelter, they can be jumpy, grabby, mouthy, bite our clothes. They're just not able They're just not able to settle themselves down at all in those moments.
And that is very often, environment caused, but also the situations in which typically lead to a dog being in a shelter. Even if it's something like your dog just got out of the backyard, well, now they're out in the neighborhood, they're running around, people are trying to catch them, and out of the goodness of their heart, they see them. Now there's people pulling over on the side of the road trying to chase them, and these dogs are going down back alleys and jumping over fences, and they're so hyped up and overloaded that you then put them in a strange place, and there's no hope here of regulation.
No,
right?
No, none whatsoever. No. Really, and they're not being bad. It's not a dog being bad. They're not a bad dog. They're just, their nervous system has exceeded its capacity. And they're just not able to calm down in those moments.
And they are also in distress.
That's right. Yeah. So we could jump now into then, like, how does that affect the pet parents? And what behaviors would you normally see that it's a state of arousal that is causing that behavior?
I think a lot of this, if we're going to talk about, like, say, puppies to begin with, a lot of times when they say, the puppy zoomies or the witching hour or something like that, that is oftentimes an over-arousal issue. Now, it has a lot to do with biology and the inner workings that are contributing to that, right? And we could have a whole episode on the puppy stages and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, though, they are in this energized state that is broaching upon that overloaded zone. And now you're starting to see, jumping and nipping and scratching and barking and whimpering and whining and a lot of attention-seeking behavior and running around the house and maybe scratching at the carpets and
humping
even. Yes, we definitely see it in puppy dogs. It's not, at that point, it's not a sexual behavior. It is an over-arousal behavior. Yeah. Right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things that we emphasize a lot in our training when we're working with puppies is predictability. Yeah. Right? So when we're trying to help dogs with aroused states, right? Why do you think it's important to have predictability?
Well, I think what we were saying earlier is we can't at that moment stop and talk to them.
No.
Right? If we could talk to dogs, that'd be really advantageous for our job.
Would it though?
But you can't, right? You can't just say, stop. What's going on? What are you feeling right now? Right? So we have to have these ways basically to communicate to our dog. And unfortunately, we can't do it through language. So what we can do is through these predictability behavior patterns, right? Where we can start to create some sense of calm, some sense of security, some sense of normalness in this environment. And what we're hoping to do there is to graduate them back down through these stages to hopefully get back into a thinking zone, which then all the other tools are now back on the table.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, dogs like to know what's next, what's happening next. Yeah. They love predictability. They like routine. They like patterns. patterns make them feel safe.
Yeah.
Right. So
And I always tell clients too, like no creature wants to feel out of control.
no.
They don't feel good when this is happening either. And
right.
oftentimes that's why you're getting that attention-seeking type behavior is you are their guide, you're their coach. They're feeling in a way that they don't know how to deal with. They're looking to you, right? They're coming to you saying, what do I do here? What do I do with all this energy?
That's
and
right.
the more that we can have predictable answers there, eventually those dogs, like I said, internalize those behaviors and they start to do them on their own.
Yeah.
Right. And that's when we would say we have a well-regulated dog or
That's
a dog
right.
that can self-regulate.
Yeah.
Well, it's not as easy as saying take a breath.
That's right.
Right.
That's exactly right. So what examples of things that people can do in their daily life with their dogs do you think contributes to this predictability and behavior patterns to help calm the dogs down?
Well, I think there's kind of twofold there is we can do things preemptively, right? Be proactive, try and get to the dog before these stages.
Absolutely.
And then there are more reactionary things that I think you can probably bring about when they're in the midst of this to hopefully try and snap them back to, like I said, more of a thinking state. So if we're talking about that preemptive one, actually, if you want to go back and watch our video on enrichment, I think this is a great tool here is having the dog have biological outlets in its life that can bring about some of these calming behaviors. As we talked about in enrichment, enrichment is not supposed to just tire out the dog. It's supposed to give them access to and choice to exercise natural behaviors that are then self-calming, self-soothing. Right? And if they're self-soothing, if they're things that make them feel more confident, more calm, more complete, that is also self-regulating them.
That's true.
Right.
So that would be activities like sniffing, decompression walks.
Yeah, chewing, licking.
Routines, right? Like we were talking about routines.
Yep.
So they could have a routine at mealtime. They could have a routine for transitions like going out doorways.
Yeah.
And like we do that here in our puppy class, right? We teach that in week 2, right? We teach people how to bodily help the dog calm down by going and lying on a dog bed. And then the routine that gets built following week 2 is every time they come in, the dog is supposed to walk in, the puppy is supposed to walk in with their human, walk to their bed in the same spot that it was in the last time, right? And they're supposed to go on there, lie down, and have something to lick or chew. So that the puppies walk in and don't go, right?
And I think that's a great example because at face value, you might think, well, that's an obedience exercise. We're putting them on place, we're asking for a stay, and then that obedience is what is doing the job there. When in actuality, we're putting them on a safe space. We're asking for a relaxation behavior, right? And we're teaching them that once you're here, you're calm, you're safe, you're protected. And that is self-regulating. So even though it might appear as an obedience exercise, really it's a relaxation, it's a self-regulation, it's something that is going to help with these over-energized feelings. And when you're entering an environment with 7 other puppies there, you're going to be pretty energized.
Right? And but it gives them predictability, right? So they know when they walk in, it's not
there's my spot.
There's 5 other puppies in here and I'm going to lose my mind. It's no, I walk in, I go to my spot, I lie down, my mommy gives me something to lick or chew, and then that keeps the puppies able to think when we start our class. You're able to then have those puppies come off their beds and work with their people without too many difficulties and too much trouble focusing and paying attention because they weren't starting off the class in a super overloaded zone right off the bat.
And so I think that falls into, I think more of those preemptive, proactive tactics is one thing as an owner that you can do is you try and identify the situations in which your dog does become over-aroused. When are you noticing that they become extremely energized? When are you noticing that they become overloaded? Then let's think of a behavior pattern that we can start teaching them before they feel that way.
That's right.
So that when they do feel that way, this is something that is going to be calming to them, right? So that you've mentioned coming into a puppy class, right? But that could be, people coming over.
That's right.
You've mentioned getting out of a car, right? Going to somebody's house, going to a park, right? Having something to say. We don't just open the door and then energy's on. We open the door, we do this, and then once we do this, then we can go do that exciting thing. Right? So that would be more, I think, of those preemptive things that you can do.
I agree. I agree. So just as like summaries, because we kind of like talked about them all in pieces, but let's put it together for people, what some of those practical tools families can use to help their dogs stay regulated.
Yeah.
So pattern games,
Pattern games,
right? Those are
absolutely.
really helpful. So there's a woman named Leslie McDevitt who has a great book called, I think it's called Control Unleashed,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so.
Control
Yeah.
Unleashed. If I can find a link for it, I'll put it in the description, right? But so she has games like the 1, 2, 3 treat,
Yep.
right? The up down game, right? Middle is a good one. We
Yep.
do middle. We teach middle in our puppy class, right? So any games that are predictable and help anchor the dog are really good. So when you see them start, when they get into that energized zone, so you see them sort of tipping over into the energized zone, you can use these pattern games to help bring them back down a little bit so
Yep.
that they stay in that thinking zone. And of course, our settle training, like our
Relaxation.
relaxation on a dog's cot or mat or something like that is a very useful, because bodily relaxing. We did post something on that on Facebook about a tip was like teaching your dog to settle bodily.
Yeah.
Right, lying down somewhere. Right, helps their nervous system calm down.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, as we said earlier,
Yeah.
what the body is doing then impacts how you feel, which then impacts how you think.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you mentioned enrichment, right?
Yep.
But it's strategic.
Yes.
Right? So
Yes.
we want balanced enrichment. We don't want just like physical enrichment, for example, right?
Well, because I think ultimately, if we link this with that enrichment video,
Yeah.
if you misuse your enrichment, you can create states of over-arousal.
100%.
Right? So you're actually going to do yourself a disservice if what you're thinking is, well, I'm going to calm the dog down. Let's take him to that really busy park and throw the ball for 15 minutes, 25 minutes
Yeah.
in a row.
That's
well,
right.
you're not doing anything there to de-energize the dog and get them back into the thinking zone. If anything, at some point, they're going to become very overloaded.
That's right. I would say if you're thinking about it from an enrichment standpoint, it's those sniffing,
Yeah.
chewing, exploring decompression walks where the dog has room and they can explore and they're not following cues from us.
Yeah.
Right. They actually get to just take a moment and just be a dog for a second. I think those are the things from an enrichment standpoint
Yeah.
that help calm them down.
And I think a lot of what you just said there is, I don't know if we didn't really touch on what you can do in the moment, right? Other than the proactive type of things.
Right.
Trying to bring about those behaviors is what you can do when your dog is already in these
Yes.
modes and you don't yet have a predictable behavior pattern.
That's right.
Things like getting distance and going into an area and letting them sniff.
Yep.
Scatter feeding, right? We don't have to train the dog to want to sniff for food there. Now, if they're extremely overloaded and fixated on something, like you said, they're probably not going to sniff or eat.
That's right.
So getting distance, right? Going
Yes.
to a quiet area, going to the tall grass, backing away, finding an alleyway that you can duck down really quickly and trying to do a bit of a scatter feed.
That's right.
Those are your kind of management strategies in the moment to get
Yeah.
that dog to calm back down.
That's it. Exactly. Totally. So if there's, if you want families to remember anything, what is some of your big takeaways? What are if you remember anything else, just remember this one thing. What would it be?
For me, I think it's going to be that catchphrase that we said earlier, is you're not going to be able to cue your way out of over-arousal.
That is correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Your cueing, your training, your obedience can help you create your behavior patterns that will assist you here.
Yeah.
But in and of itself, asking the dog to sit or
Yeah.
down is not going to be effective, especially if they're in that overloaded zone and they're not hearing you to begin with.
That's right.
Right.
Yep. And building predictable routines, right? So that the dog knows what to expect also helps.
Yeah.
That's a biggie for
And
me.
remembering
Yeah.
that this is not your dog's choice.
That's right.
They're not purposefully misbehaving here. They're not having selective hearing, right?
Yeah.
They are themselves experiencing an emotional state that they need help and guidance through.
That's right. And then for me, I have one that I always say to everybody when they have a dog that's overly aroused, you need to be the opposite of what the dog is.
Yeah.
So if that dog is jumping and barking and freaking out, it's really hard for us to do. This is where we had mentioned in the beginning about regulating our own emotions. If you want the dog to calm down, you have to become still. You have to take a deep breath.
Model what you want.
Model
to see
what
in
you
your dog.
want
Yeah.
so that the dog can mirror that behavior, right?
Which is tough, right?
It's very tough when
we
you got a
understand
dog,
it from
yeah.
a human level as well.
Yeah.
When you have a dog jumping up at you and barking and they just will not stop, it's
Yeah.
so tempting to try and ignore, and then we ourselves start to get energized. We ourselves start to get overloaded, and then now we react in a way that we might not want to.
That's right.
Right. So,
but our reactions also fuel the dog's reactions. So if we are trying to like yell at them or do any of that, just trying to get them under control with the leash or any of that kind of stuff, then the dog is going to actually get more overloaded, more aroused. Whereas if we can, definitely you have to protect yourself. Like, so if you've got a big dog and they're like jumping and biting and by all means, put something in front of you so they can't bite you and, things like that. And yes, you have to hold onto the leash because you can't have them running around loose. But you just don't want to be doing a lot of movement, and you don't want to be adding a lot of our energy into the mix, right? So you just want to just take a deep breath and just calm down and wait.
And the more that you practice these things, the more they become predictable behavior patterns for yourself.
Absolutely.
Right? So you notice these states in your dogs, and you just act in a predictable way as well, which will help you remain calm, and then by part then helps your dog calm down. Yeah.
I think that's so powerful. And like really, if you embody these things, then like your relationship with your dog is going to change.
Yeah.
It's going to significantly change. And then your training, your safety, the dog's training and safety, everything is going to improve over time.
And I can already hear some of the comments and people watching this saying, well, what if it's not my dog that's over aroused? What if it's another dog? Right? And that is where it can be very difficult if you're entering a situation with other dogs who are unregulated. This is why so often dog parks can be very difficult for people to go to, because what you're experiencing there is a lot of dogs who are probably extremely overloaded. They haven't been out for a very long time. The owners take them there, they let them out. This is their one kind of avenue or outlet for the day, and off we go. Right?
That's
All I say there is, the only thing that you can truly control is your own dog and your own behavior, right? And ultimately, if you need to, you have to remove yourself from those situations.
That's right. Exactly. I think that's a good place to stop for this week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So thank you everybody for tuning in. So next week, as I had mentioned last week, these last few weeks have been leading up to our topic for next week, which is reactivity. So we're going to talk about reactivity next week. So remember to subscribe so that you don't miss next week's episode of Fireside Chats, where we're going to deep dive into reactivity, which is a huge behavior issue that we hear about all the time. And we have reactivity clinics that get filled up all the time. So and you're right, more and more. It seems to be just a epidemic of reactivity.
And another one of those catch-all terms too, I think,
Definitely.
which we'll talk about next week, is reactivity oftentimes encompasses a lot of behavior, so we really need to understand what we're talking about.
Exactly. So don't forget to hit subscribe, the notification bell. Give us a thumbs up if you really like this episode and want to see more of it. Don't forget to put in the comments if there's a topic, a struggle or a challenge or something you're just interested in about your dog and you really want to learn more about it. And we will do some researching for you and try to present some information that can help you with your relationship with your dog. And in the meantime, we'll see you next week.
Bye.